Welcome to another deep dive where we unpack the complexities of global challenges. Today, we're plunging into one of the most long-standing and frankly intricate geopolitical puzzles, the relationship between the United States and North Korea.
Yeah, it's a dynamic really defined by, well, deep-seated distrust and a history of unresolved conflict. It's all fundamentally rooted in the Korean War that, technically never concluded.
Indeed. For decades, we've observed this recurring cycle, haven't we? Tension, then various attempts at diplomacy, sometimes hopeful, sometimes not, and all the while, significant advancements in North Korea's military capabilities. Many of you might be wondering, well, why haven't previous efforts to denuclearize fully succeeded? Or what exactly is happening right now on the Korean Peninsula that's escalating tensions?
Right, so our deep dive today will try to unpack the historical roots of this profound distrust. We'll trace the various diplomatic efforts, from the early agreements right up to those high-level summits. And then we'll zoom in on North Korea's rapidly evolving military might and its crucial emerging alliances. Our mission here is really to understand why that narrow focus purely on denuclearization has often, maybe counterintuitively, magnified hostilities, and what the current landscape means for both regional and global stability.
Okay, so let's start with that lingering legacy then, the unresolved conflict. The Korean War, it kicked off in 1950, was halted by an armistice agreement in 1953, but crucially, no formal peace treaty was ever signed, which means the Koreas are still technically at war. That just underpins everything, doesn't it?
That's absolutely right. That technical state of war is fundamental. The division of the peninsula after World War II, you had the U.S. occupying the South, the Soviet Union the North. It led straight to ideologically opposing governments. The Republic of Korea, ROK, in the south, and the DPRK, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, in the north. This foundational split just set the stage for enduring tension. North Korea even commemorates July 27th as Victory Day, which really emphasizes this narrative of triumph over, as they put it, imperialist forces.
So over the years, there have been attempts to bridge this gap. Some seemed more hopeful, right? Like in the late 80s, early 90s, after the Cold War ended, there were signs of a thaw. North Korea actually joined the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, in 85. Plus, the U.S. pulled most tactical nukes from South Korea in 91. Joint military exercises were canceled. It looked like maybe channels were opening.
It certainly looked that way. There were initial steps toward engagement. But then came the agreed framework in 1994. The idea was North Korea freezes its nuclear program, and in return, they get energy aid, security guarantees, steps toward normalized relations. However, this faced huge hurdles. Washington didn't fully deliver its side of the bargain, partly because of, deep skepticism in the U.S. Congress. A lot of lawmakers just didn't trust Pyongyang, wanted a tougher line, So progress on normalization stalled, energy aid was delayed. This mutual distrust just festered, and the framework basically broke down by 2003. Which prompted North Korea to then openly pursue uranium enrichment.
So that insistence on complete dismantlement first.
Exactly, before any real concessions. Pyongyang saw that as an existential threat. It arguably fueled their drive to speed up the nuclear program, not slow it down. Kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, really. Deepened distrust on both sides.
So given that collapse, distrust just got worse. How did later administrations try to handle it? Or did they just change tactics completely?
Well, there was the Perry process, 1999 to 2000 under Clinton. South Korean President Kim Dae-jung was a big part of that, pushing his sunshine policy. It did lead to a burst of high-level diplomacy, warmer inter-Korean ties, culminating in that first-ever inter-Korean summit in June 2000.
But then, President George W. Bush, a much harder line, famously calling North Korea part of the axis of evil with Iran and Iraq in 2001. That phrase, axis of evil, that sounds like a clear declaration of hostility. How did Pyongyang take that? What was the immediate reaction?
Oh, absolutely. And then a leaked nuclear posture review named North Korea as a potential nuclear target. That just intensified their resolve. Kim Jong-il condemned it, called it a violation of sovereignty, talked about needing defensive nukes. So this directly led Pyongyang to openly talk about building a nuclear deterrent force unless the U.S. ended its, quote, hostile policy. But the Bush administration stuck to its guns, demanding complete, verifiable, irreversible dismantlement, CVAD, before any real talks could even happen. It created this total impasse. Demanding everything up front basically shut the door on dialogue and, you could argue, push them further down the nuclear path.
Which brings us to the six-party talks, 2003 to 2009. China, Japan, North Korea, Russia, South Korea, the U.S. Was there any real shift from North Korea during those talks, or was it just managing crises?
There was actually a critical breakthrough in 2005. North Korea pledged to abandon its nuclear weapons, R&D programs, return to the NPT. They even took some concrete steps. Remember the televised demolition of the Yongbyon reactor tower in 2008?
Right, I remember that.
But ultimately, the talks collapsed again in 2009, this time over verification disagreements. Again, that trust deficit. Pyongyang said the U.S. wasn't delivering promised aid. Washington wanted stricter checks before moving forward. It just fell apart.
And then under President Obama, strategic patience. What was that strategy about? How did that change things, if at all?
Strategic patience, yeah, from 2009 to 2017. The idea was to break what they saw as a pattern of provocation, extortion, and reward. So, increase sanctions, isolate the regime, rather than rushing to engage every time there was a crisis. The administration seemed generally reluctant to talk directly, feeling it might legitimize Pyongyang's provocations.
Did it work?
Well, critics argue it sort of ceded the initiative to Pyongyang. It allowed them to keep developing weapons while the U.S. basically waited. There was that leap day deal in 2012, freezing their program for food aid. But it collapsed almost immediately after North Korea launched a satellite.
Which they claimed was peaceful.
But the U.S. saw it as a missile test violation. So yeah, it highlighted just how hard it was to find common ground under that framework.
Okay, fast forward to 2017, the Trump administration. Maximum pressure, threats of fire and fury. But then, quite surprisingly, those unprecedented summits with Kim Jong-un.
Right. The Singapore summit in June 2018. The first time U.S. and North Korean leaders ever met face-to-face. They issued a joint statement pledging better relations, working toward complete denuclearization of the peninsula. Trump even agreed to suspend large-scale U.S.-South Korea military drills, a big concession. He also reportedly agreed to move quickly on an end-of-war declaration and, famously said the problem was largely solved. There was a lot of optimism then.
Yeah, I remember that feeling. But despite those initial steps, things stalled pretty quickly. What happened after Singapore? Why did that optimism fade?
Well, North Korea did take a few steps. They dismantled a missile engine test site, returned remains of 55 U.S. soldiers, goodwill gestures. But a fundamental deadlock emerged over sequencing. Denuclearization versus sanctions relief.
The same old problem.
Pretty much. The U.S. said sanctions stay until denuclearization is complete. North Korea wanted normalization, sanctions easing first, maybe starting with that end-of-war declaration. This disagreement just blew up the second summit in Hanoi in February 2019. It ended abruptly, no agreement. Apparently, North Korea offered to dismantle Yongbyon for partial sanctions relief, but it wasn't enough for the U.S. That failure in Hanoi really hardened positions again on both sides, magnified the hostility.
So where are we today, then, with North Korea's actual military capabilities? Is it still just talk of a deterrent, or have they gone much further?
Oh, far beyond just talk. North Korea has declared its nuclear arsenal complete. They've adopted a doctrine that explicitly includes the preemptive use of nuclear weapons. That's a big shift from pure deterrence. They've kept expanding fissile material stockpiles at Yongbyon. Estimates are they have enough material now for maybe 50 to 70 nuclear weapons.
50 to 70.
Yeah. And what's more, they publicly revealed an undeclared HEU facility, highly enriched uranium, in Kangson back in September 2024. Revealing an undeclared site like that, it's a huge signal of intent to, quote, exponentially expand the nuclear arsenal. It ramps up their bargaining leverage significantly.
That level of capability is alarming. What about the delivery systems, the missiles? What's new there?
They've been methodically advancing, following their 5-year plan from early 2021. We're seeing advanced ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles like the Hwasongpho-19, test-launched October 2024. It showed better performance than its solid-fueled predecessor, maybe a bigger payload for MIRVs. Multiple warheads, though.
Yeah.
That MIRV tech is probably still early days for them.
Right.
And they've done, I think, 6 tests of hypersonic missiles, showing real progress in design, engines, even using new carbon fiber materials in January 2025. They're pushing hard on advanced tech.
And I've heard about cruise missiles, too. And submarines, are those also part of this big push?
Yes, absolutely. They've developed and tested strategic cruise missiles like the Fire Arrow and Arrow series, some with ranges over 2,000 kilometers. Big reach. They're definitely working on submarine-launch capabilities, too. Solid-fueled SLBMs, submarine-launch ballistic missiles, look like they're getting close to completion.
Wow.
And another big step, they reportedly got that Maljong-1 military spy satellite into orbit in November 2023, likely with Russian help after earlier failures. So, a growing space capability, too.
It's a massive investment across the board. Why put so much effort into this when it just increases international isolation? What's the strategic thinking?
Well, primarily it's tied to their security needs, as they see them. Regime survival is paramount, but it's also meticulously used as bargaining leverage for any future talks with the U.S. These actions, like claiming tactical nukes, the Hwasong-31, they're carefully calibrated provocations. They test the waters, signal their objectives, demonstrate resolve to be treated as a nuclear state. And if talks stall completely, there's real speculation about a potential seventh nuclear test. To force the issue, show further advancement. These capabilities are both a shield and a bargaining chip.
And this isn't happening in isolation, of course. How has their relationship with neighbors changed, especially South Korea?
That's been a huge shift. Kim Jong-un explicitly ended the long-standing goal of reunification. Gone. He now designates the South as the principal enemy. References to peaceful reunification, removed from state media, public monuments, everything, around January 2024.
Redefining them as a foreign state entirely.
Exactly, which, grimly, helps legitimize potential future attacks and their internal logic. We've seen tensions spike, like artillery fire near the NLL, the disputed sea border, in January 24. Both sides are basically ditching the 2018 military agreement meant to reduce tensions, and South Korea's President Yoon has responded very forcefully, vowing to punish the North multiple times over if attacked. So, a real hardening on both sides.
And then there's Russia. We keep hearing about deepening military cooperation. How significant is that? How does that change the game?
That's one of the most critical recent developments. White House officials called it unprecedented. Since 2023, North Korea has reportedly sent Russia over 1 million artillery shells, 152mm ones, plus short-range ballistic missiles for Ukraine. There were even reports of North Korean military personnel going to Russia around October 2024, maybe for training, maybe combat experience.
And in return,
Russia's providing more support, food, fuel, raw materials, and potentially crucial technical help for North Korea's own weapons programs, like those spy satellites. It boosts North Korea's production, gives their troops maybe some combat experience, and crucially strengthens Pyongyang's hand significantly, giving them a lifeline against sanctions.
So pulling all this together, what does it mean for future U.S.-North Korea relations? Are we just stuck in this cycle of tension, failed talks, more tension?
Well, some analysts are arguing pretty forcefully that the whole U.S. approach, denuclearization through pressure, has basically failed. That instead of restraining North Korea, it's often fueled their provocations. They propose a fundamental rethink, a shift toward stable coexistence with a nuclear-armed North Korea, prioritizing risk reduction, improving relations while maintaining deterrence, at least for now, tolerating their nuclear arms, because pure deterrence alone might be too risky.
So basically acknowledging the reality on the ground they have nukes and trying to manage the risks instead of demanding the impossible upfront. Sounds pragmatic, maybe.
Exactly. Moving away from what some see as an unattainable goal of immediate total denuclearization towards something more like realistic, stable coexistence. Kim Jong-un, it seems, is interested in talking again, maybe especially with the future Trump administration. But he'll likely approach it very differently this time, like a strategic rematch. He learned from Hanoi. He probably feels he needs this advanced military capability to be taken seriously. So expect a much more complex, demanding approach from him than before.
The stakes just feel incredibly high, especially with this potential new dynamic emerging. North Korea, China, Russia on one side, South Korea, U.S., Japan on the other. That's almost a new Cold War alignment in the region.
Indeed. That dynamic links the peninsula directly to broader global rivalries. It really forces South Korea, for example, to prepare for tough negotiations on managing the nuclear threat, sanctions, maybe military exercises, but at the same time, it necessitates strengthening that trilateral security cooperation with the U.S. and Japan. This emerging axis definitely emboldens Kim Jong-un. It bolsters North Korea's position by letting them exploit big power competition and the gridlock at the UN Security Council.
We've covered decades of really complex history, failed diplomacy, impressive, if worrying, military strides. It's just so clear that the path to stability on the Korean Peninsula is still incredibly challenging, shaped by these deep historical wounds, the new weapons, the shifting alliances.
Yeah, the current situation demands this really careful balance. Deterrence is necessary, but also a fresh look at diplomatic strategies. Maybe different ones than we've tried before. The key question, the one that hangs over everything, is how do you manage these threats? How do you reduce the risk of catastrophic conflict in a region where, remarkably, a peace treaty is still missing after more than 70 years?
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what really stands out to you? When you look at this delicate, dangerous balance of power and constant struggle to manage the threat, what could peace even look like on a peninsula that's still technically at war? Something for all of us to think about.